I'm grateful. This was the response of a friend of mine to my casual question, "How are you?" Her response took me by surprise. And not just the first or the second time I heard her say it, but every time she responded this way. But I can't exactly say why her response surprised me so much. Maybe it was because it wasn't the answer that I expected. Or maybe it was because of the beauty in her honesty. Or maybe it was the power behind her statement. Regardless of whatever it was, I think most of us would agree that the standard response we're accustomed to receiving is fine, or pretty good, or maybe even once in a while, "I'm great," when we ask the conversational placeholder, "How are you?" I'm grateful. My friend chose her words intentionally and with care. And I think that's because she was trying to make a point. That gratitude is not only a response when things are going well in our lives, but it's also a choice that we make. Today's gospel story of the 10 lepers is not only a testimony to the miraculous healing power of Jesus, but it's also a powerful testament to the power of gratitude. And this story that highlights the poor leper who comes back to thank Jesus for healing him should serve as an example for how each of us are called to live each day in gratitude for all that God has done and all that God continues to do for all of us. Leprosy in Jesus' day was a dreadful disease, and mostly because it wasn't clearly understood. Biblical leprosy wasn't the same as the terrible disease that we think of today as leprosy. Biblical leprosy would have included such skin diseases as ringworm, psoriasis, eczema, warts, and others. Now, the upside of this is that while some skin diseases are potentially fatal, others are harmless. Yet, because of a lack of medical knowledge, first-century Jews lumped all of them into one category and declared those who were infected spiritually unclean and socially unfit. For many, it was a death sentence. It was assumed that they were being punished for something they'd done wrong. So they were banished, not to be associated with, but avoided because of the possibility that they would spread their contamination as well as their condemnation to others. But some things never change, do they? We still tend to shun those we don't understand. We often judge other cultures as odd and other customs and anyone with any kind of difference as peculiar. As for the lepers in the first century, the law of Moses was clear: put out of the camp every leper and everyone who has an issue, and whoever is unclean by the dead. For the Hebrews, it was a matter of life and death, because an infectious disease could wipe out an entire village. And so once someone was declared to be a leper, the individual was banished as a primitive means of quarantine. Cast out the afflicted so they don't infect the others. Lepers were forced to live out in the wilderness. They were expected to dress a certain way, and if approached by others, they were expected to shout out a clear warning: "Unclean, unclean!" Even though we may have better methods of treating skin diseases today, I wonder about all the ways that we still isolate and quarantine those who we judge to be unclean. Those who are poor, those who are homeless, those who suffer from mental illness, those who have a different skin color, or those who seek asylum at our borders. I'm not exactly sure what all this is about. Are we afraid that whatever it is about them will rub off on us? I don't know. But what I do know is this is contrary to the image of God in which we are created. God is love, and the nature of love is to seek out loving relationships with others. no matter how foreign or different or displeasing they may be to us. In biblical times, once excluded from family and friends, lepers sought out the company of others, of other lepers. This highlights an innate longing of the human spirit for community, for love, and for support. So lepers gathered in the wilderness to comfort and care for one another as they suffered and died in exile. It was a small leper colony such as this that Jesus encountered on his way through the Samaritan wilderness. 10 lepers dressed in tattered rags, their bodies covered with lesions, crying out at the top of their lungs. And for some reason, when Jesus approached, they didn't cry out unclean as they were supposed to. Instead, they cried, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." I find it really interesting that they didn't ask Jesus to heal them. Rather, they asked Jesus for mercy. And just in case you're unfamiliar with what mercy means, it's defined as compassion or forgiveness shown to someone else. How did they know who Jesus was? Why didn't they warn him of the danger of their presence? Luke never says. He only says that in answer to their plea, Jesus responded with mercy. But then again, why should any of this surprise us? After all, this is the nature of Jesus, isn't it? To love the unlovable, to touch the untouchable, to seek out the least, the last, and the lost. Now we can imagine that when the 10 lepers finally realized what had happened, they leapt for joy and ran as fast as they could to the temple as Jesus instructed them to do. And why not? Up until this point, they'd been as good as dead, and now they were alive. They'd been separated from their loved ones, and now they were to be reunited. By every standard, this was a miracle of unimaginable proportions. And according to Luke, one of the lepers, seeing that he was healed, turned back to Jesus and praised God in a loud voice. Luke tells us he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. 10 were healed, and 10 were no doubt surprised by the result of what Jesus had done for them. Perhaps some, if not all of them, were overjoyed. Perhaps some of them celebrated. And perhaps a few of them even took it for granted. But what we do know is that one of them not only felt grateful, but actually decided to voice that emotion and to express his gratitude to Jesus. This person, overlooked and marginalized, discarded and discounted, banished and rejected. This person is the one who embodies what it means to see yourself as Jesus sees you. Jesus offered a gift of profound healing to these 10 lepers who approached him on that day. But more than just receiving physical healing, the 10 lepers were actually restored to community by the healing they received from Jesus. And I wonder how you and I might be agents of such healing. In our world, too often marked by fear and division, might healing just be ours to offer and in turn receive if we simply reached out with a word of kindness or curiosity or affirmation to someone we've never seen before or who we may never see again, or to one who we have passed by 1,000 times, just as those lepers who must have been passed by thousands of times without ever being noticed before. How might we be called to restore others to community by simply engaging them? Gratitude is no doubt a response to the blessings of life. But it's also a choice to see those blessings, to name them, and to express our gratitude through what we say and what we do. When we're intentional to not only choose gratitude, but also to express it, we have to understand that it comes with consequences. Because when we express our gratitude, It has an impact on those around us, and it even has the power to shape our current reality. Think about it for a moment. Gratitude isn't the only emotion we might choose to express in response to the events that take place in our lives on any given day. There are reasons for gratitude. There are also reasons for fear, anger, frustration, grief, regret, and anxiety. Each of these responses colors our experience, makes its appearance in our lives, and perhaps each of them has a role to play from time to time. But we choose how much to grant each of these responses by giving them expression. And as we do, we give them power in our lives. Because here's the thing. Gratitude, like all of our other options, becomes easier to choose the more that we practice it. Gratitude, like faith, hope, love, and commitment, are not inherent traits that some have and others don't, but rather gratitude is more like a muscle that can be strengthened over time. And as you practice giving thanks and more frequently share your gratitude, you not only grow in gratefulness, but create an example for others. More than that, you create an environment in which it's easier to be grateful and encourage those around you to see God's blessings all around us. I'm grateful. Take a moment and let those words wash over you. Because all you need to do is scan the latest news headlines, and you'll see just how scarce and desperately needed more expressions of gratitude are. Accusations, excuses, anger, cynicism, these currently seem to have a hold on our culture. And we seem to live in this age of complaining. And whether it's shared in person or increasingly through social media, it's all around us. So what a powerful and transformative response gratitude could be in these situations. Perhaps one of the greatest gifts of a practice like this is that it invites us to look outside of ourselves, to see where God is at work in the world. Saying, "I'm grateful," doesn't simply express our thankfulness. It opens up possibilities for God to shape us and those around us, to push back the tide of dissatisfaction and disconnection that affects us and makes room for a new appreciation of God's renewing and saving grace. Thanks be to God. Amen.